And then 6 months later, a tumor developed right next to the ulcer. So they said, well, we have to cut that out. We're going to give you a vagotomy pyloroplasty. Now, you understand I'm still autistic, so you just do whatever the doctor says. So, of course, I let them go in and cut into my stomach and take out the tumor. And they severed all the vagus nerves to my stomach, so I would never, ever again secrete hydrochloric acid. They put me in the class of octogenarians who do not digest food at all because they have no hydrochloric acid. Everything I ate after that, if I ate meat, it came out in big pustulations, anywhere from my forehead all the way down to my knees. I'd be just covered with those within 24 hours of eating cooked meat. So that really whittled it down because I was a big meat eater. I loved eating meat. Cooked, of course. I had everything well done. My mother didn't know how to cook, so everything was burned. Nothing was seasoned. I didn't know what seasoning was. And my father always forced salt on us. You know, he was one of those big believers in salt, so everything got salted. He wondered why he had migraines all of his life. Migraine headaches because of all the salt that he had. But that's what he did. And that's how I ate. Then the incision turned tumorous. It got up to 1.5 inches wide and 3/4 of an inch high. It was a pretty big tumor. So they said, okay, we have to irradiate that, stop it from growing. So I had 10 weeks of intense radiation therapy. Has everybody done pottery here? Know what happens when you take nice soft clay, malleable clay, a live clay, and you fire it? It's dead stone, hard as can be, depending upon the cone heat level that you take it. If you take it up to a very high level, like 1,700, 2,300 degrees, you can end up with glass, depending upon the type of clay that you're using. So that's what they did to my spine. They cauterized my spine with that intense radiation therapy. So my movement was like this, and painful. If I wanted to sit in a chair, it would take 3 to 5 minutes to get in that chair and sit. I was pretty much crippled after that. So then the radiation therapy not only cauterized my spine and made me fairly crippled and in pain all the time, it also gave me blood and bone cancer, typical of radiation. So I got blood and bone cancer. So it's even more fatigued, no energy at all. So they decided they were going to give me chemotherapy, so I went through 3 months of chemotherapy right here at UCLA. And they left me bald, completely crippled. I was crawling on my elbows like a worm. Lived for almost 2.5 years that way, crawling on the floor like a worm. It would take me 30 minutes to go from my living room to the kitchen, which was about from here back to the end of the rows there. 30 minutes to get that far. I was so fatigued and so crippled and very painful. And I couldn't sleep. I'd sleep 10 minutes at a time, 12 minutes maximum. We'll wake up in excruciating pain. So they said because of the radiation therapy, because of the blood and bone cancer, the chemotherapy, I took it, stopped it after 3 months. They said you're going to die anyway. They wanted me to go into a hospice, and I said, no hospice, no going away from my home. I was still autistic. I knew that people would be offended or ridiculed if I threw back a sentence that was wrong. 2 volunteers from the hospice agreed to come 2 to 3 times a week, shop for my food, feed me, clean the house, make food for me for a few days, and then leave. And they were very wonderful. One of them was just an 18-year-old African-American boy that was about 6'2", and he belonged to the Going thing, which at the time was a group of singers hired by the Ford Motor Company to go around singing the going thing, you know, and they were in their Mach 1, you know, Mustangs. And this kid was a volunteer.
And this kid brought me carrot juice and raw milk.
Only carrots I'd ever had were cooked, and they, you know, every time I ate a cooked vegetable, I'd projectile vomit. So my parents forced me to sit at the table for 45 minutes to 2 hours after dinner, after everybody else left, because if I vomited anything, they would put that much more back on my plate, and I had to eat it. So I had to learn how to cut my sense of taste off and my sense of vomit and repulsion off and swallow and get it down and hold it. So it was a very difficult thing to do. So here I was in a situation where I was vomiting a lot, and carrot juice, he was offering me the carrot juice, and I was saying, I don't think so. Finally, he coaxed me into drinking it. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted in probably a year since my stomach surgery. So I started drinking it, and then 10 days later, my autism popped off, just like a light switch. I thought, oh, verb, adverb, adjective, conjunction, all of this stuff. All of a sudden I understood everything, and I started communicating. So I called my uncle, who was matriculating for his doctorate in psychology here at UCLA, and started having a conversation with him. And he said, "Is this Aajonus? Aajonus?" You know. And I said, "Yeah, isn't this great?" And he says, "Well," I said, "what I want to do is get a lot of books on nutrition. Do you know anything about that?" He said, "Well, I don't believe in nutrition and all that. You know, it's more of what's in your mind." Of course, he was a psychologist. You know, so well, what else is he going to say and believe? So I called Steve, the young African American who had got me into the carrot juice, and I said, "Listen, I spent all my money on I don't have anything left. I'm about to lose the house, and I want to buy a lot of books." And he said, "Sure, I'll loan you, you know." So he loaned me $110, and $110 in 1969 was a lot of books, because, you know, paperbacks were like 75 cents, 95 cents max for a big, thick book. And then hardbacks were anywhere from $1.25 to $2. So I got a lot of books on nutrition, and, you know, some of them were, you know, mind over matter stuff, you know, so I went through all those, and everything contradicted everything else. These people said, "Eat this." These people, "No, don't eat that because this will happen." So completely confused about what to do. So all I could do was just experiment and try different foods. So that's what I did. I tried different foods. Every time I ate something raw, it was easy, much easier. Didn't have much trouble with indigestion. Even with my situation and all my poisons that I had in the body, I could still do it. Every time I ate, of course, I'd have to go right to sleep, no matter if it was cooked or raw. But I had no energy, not enough nutrients in my body to be able to sustain anything else but digesting. That means I had to go to sleep for about an hour to an hour and a half after eating. And that was fine because I was always in pain. My bones were just aching. The only way I could stay out of pain was to get in a bathtub. I had a clawfoot, you know, tub, so it was pretty deep and pretty long, so I could fill it to the top, immerse myself in there, just my head sticking out, and put, you know, some Epsom salts in there and some raw milk, and it would cause me to be slightly buoyant, so I could sleep without any pain. If I slept anywhere else, 10, 12 minutes, 7 minutes, I was up in excruciating pain. Have to move over, let that pain subside, and then I go to sleep for a few minutes and I wake with pain again. In the bathtub, I would have almost had literally no pain, or pain that was easy to sleep through. And I wake up in an hour and a half, 2 hours, freezing to death because the water got so cold. So I just let some of the water out, heat it again, really high temperature, and then go to sleep again. So I could sleep 10, 12 hours like that. So that's when I finally started getting a little bit healthier and well quicker. So I got a nutritionist who taught me a lot about nutrition. He tutored me for 3.5 years. Even though I was no longer autistic, I still had learning disabilities because I never learned to learn as everybody else did. So this tutor was very good. He was mainly into raw foods. He was about a 75% raw fooder. At times, he said, some of it's mind over matter, so I attempted to do the mind over matter stuff and went back to my RC Cola and donuts, powdered donuts that I loved, and all this kind of garbage. And of course, within a week, 10 days, I'd be back into autism. So on the third time that happened, I said, listen, I may have been an idiot, but I'm not stupid. So, food has something to do with your health. It's chemistry in itself. So I adhered to some kind of nutritional program. And I got more and more into raw, but it was moving into vegetarianism. I went from a raw lacto-ovo vegetarian where I was eating raw eggs and dairy, got very healthy and compared to where I was, very healthy and strong. I mean, I didn't have to crawl on the floor so much. I mean, I could crawl on my knees and hands like a baby, and I had to learn all over how to walk and run and do all of that. So I was getting healthier, and I felt a lot better. And then when I hit 27 years old, I thought, I'm not going to learn what I need to learn to recover from where I've been, from all the medical therapy, because that did the most damage. I thought, I'm going to have to go out and live out in the wild. I'm going to find tribes to live with. I'm going to live with animals and see what it is that makes all of them healthy and they don't have disease in the wild. So unless man encroaches upon their territory, pollutes it in some way, or robs them of their food. So I went on a bicycle with 4 saddlebags of biochemistry, physiology, anatomy, all these books, and my little dog on the back, little Lhasa Hungarian Puli, and she traveled with me. So we bicycled all over the place. She ran off with the coyotes one night. Actually went to live with the coyotes. She was a raw fooder, so she had no trouble. And if she was a female, so they didn't kill her. She went with them. And this was while we were in Yuma. So I traveled with my bicycle all the way across the United States and all areas of the United States 5 times, went all the way down to the Yucatan and all the way up to Alaska in a 2.5-year period. Sometimes I was pretty fatigued, so I'd throw my bicycle on a freight car, bungee cord it to the freight car, and just hang my hammock along the open doors, and just watch the scenery go by. Sometimes some border patrol, if I was going down into Mexico or getting next to the Mexican border, the border patrol or the railroad dicks, they called them, were there. And at that time, I was bearded, long-haired, and I wore robes, I knew that if I were a hippie, that if I wore robes, they would at least have a religious feeling and they wouldn't hurt me so badly, especially in Mexico. So, they jump up on the freight car and see me dressed like that, look at their gun and look at me and, like some vision with a bicycle and a hammock in this freight car and say, stay out of sight. And they leave me alone. But I watched them beat and roll people pretty badly, put them in the hospital. So they were pretty good to me. And I slept in graveyards most of the time. Nobody bothers you in a graveyard, especially when you look like JC. So, so that's mostly where I spent my nights sleeping. Not even the police would bother me there. So I traveled like that, and I lived with the Yaqui Indians in northern Mexico, with the Mayan Indians in the Yucatan, the Sioux in the Dakotas, and the Inuit in Alaska. And all of them told me, the only way you're going to get well is to eat raw meat.